Welcome to another edition of the morning briefing. After a tremendous weekend of sporting activity, I'm Jeff DeForest, along with one Mike Lubie. Lubitz, very happy to have you with us here on NoFilter.net. It was a little snapback to reality for us yesterday here in South Florida as the Miami Dolphins, Miami has the Dolphins, the greatest football team. They stole that song. It's probably the worst song. The Dolphins, as glamorous as the franchise has been with Don Shula, the winningest coach of all time, the great Dan Marino. You had Bob Greasy, another Hall of Famer, any number of other greats that have played here over the years. For a time, they were like the winningest franchise in all of sports in terms of percentage. That has since faded a little bit since many years of going 6-10 sounds good. They weren't that bad. They never really bottomed out. Now, that was always a thing, one of the cliches that surrounded the problems when people were analyzing the franchise, and they said, "Well, you know what? They've been mired in mediocrity, which is the worst thing that you could do in sport today." And there is some element of truth to that, where you're almost better off. I mean, we're looking at a couple of baseball teams just bottoming out completely and starting from scratch. And in baseball, the draft is less of an influence, but it can be significant. And clearly, the Braves and the Houston Astros, a couple of division winners this year in Major League Baseball, after 3-4 seasons of losing 100 games in a row, now have become perennial contenders. And we were always waiting for that syndrome to kind of afflict and affect the Miami Dolphins. Now, it looks like they went all in a couple of years ago, and even more so this year. Unfortunately, the Jalen Ramsey deal didn't work out, and never was it more in evidence how desperate they should have been to have Jalen Ramsey in the lineup than this guy Kohu, who has been a nice story, came out of nowhere, was doing a good job in nickel packages for the Miami Dolphins. But McDermott there with the Buffalo Bills, my God, just put a flaming arrow in this guy's back and said, we're going to pick on this guy. He's going to be a target all day long. So the Dolphins go down to the Buffalo Bills 48-20 in that ball game. And it was a little bit deflating for Dolphin fans that thought, and backers that thought, wow, I mean, this team is unstoppable offensively and not bad enough defensively for anybody to go toe-to-toe with them. Buffalo, who people had given up for dead, you know what? That window is shrinking, Lobie. For them to have the opportunity to win, they didn't do it last year. And I tell you what, it's not looking so good. Josh Allen looked bozoic in week number 1. The Bills lost to the Jets even after the Aaron Rodgers injury, sparking the notion that maybe they'd still be the same with Zach Wilson at quarterback. And while Wilson looked good in the game last night, the Jets fall to 1-3 and figure to be a non-entity, a non-commodity the rest of the year. But the Buffalo Bills, after losing that game, they've been great. They're right up there with the elite of the league. So I don't know that there was any great shame in losing that game in by 28 points, 4 touchdowns. But we've seen in the NFL where, like you and I are, Louis, in all of our business ventures, we're day to day. The Miami Dolphins and just about everybody else in the NFL is somewhat week to week. Except for, and I'm starting to become a big fan. I love the Bill Belichick post-game press conferences, especially after a loss. Because and this is kind of sick, maybe a little bit macabre, but I was a big fan of the Manson parole hearings, Charles Manson. And every few years, they would televise on court TV the Manson parole hearings. I guess they got attention on maybe other news outlets as well. And it was scary because, I mean, you're watching the ramblings of an absolute psychotic serial killing madman. Well, he wasn't a serial killer so much, but just a butcher. I mean, like an evil human being. I mean, a guy that just reeks of the devil. And, they wheel him in there and you're thinking that this guy got no chance of letting this guy out. I mean, it's never going to happen. This man is going to die in prison, and rightfully so. And he would get up there and be talking about all of this bizarre Timothy Leary type spaced out, negativity. And you were just praying that one of the people on the California parole board, which I don't know, did they not look like the burnt out boxing judges at a Las Vegas fight? Thought you were seeing like Jerry Roth and Chuck Giampa, Dwayne Ford. Dwayne Ford scores the fight. Who's the Don King fighter? 118-110 Canelo. And you were praying that one of them wouldn't fall asleep. Yeah. And end up just, blindly they. Okay, this guy's been in here long enough. Probably shouldn't be banging on the table here with this sensitive equipment. Could drive the show right off the air. With Belichick, though, it's just like that, right? Yesterday, they were asking him, why he took Mac Jones out and whether or not that it was an indicator that maybe the starting position is now in question with the New England Patriots, which I don't even know who the backup is. Brian Hoyer retired after 62 years in the league. I think he broke in with Joe Camp, Brian Hoyer, and so they don't have him there. Always good for like maybe one drive, kind of like a Colt McCoy type where, wow, look at that, man. The cat can actually play a little bit. And then the team loses 51-7 as he's unable to sustain anything beyond like a 3 and out after that. But Belichick, I mean, was asked about Mac Jones, and the answer, should they not put subtitles up now in any Bill Belichick press conference, Lubie?
100%. 100%.
You don't know if he's talking about Mac Jones or ordering a bagel and cream cheese, and don't charge me too much for the lox, but I want a big, thick piece. Who knows what the hell this guy is talking about? I mean, he just goes, like, what was that, Bill? I don't know. So Lubie and I now, somebody put us up to this, and when the Patriots come to Miami, we're going to get credentials to the game, and we're going to run into the post-game press conference. We're going to cross our fingers, which in all likelihood, you would have to think the Patriots will lose to the Miami Dolphins based on what we saw. Even in the Dolphins getting shellacked by 4 touchdowns, still seem vastly superior to what we witnessed with that pathetic performance by the Patriots against the Dallas Cowboys yesterday, putting the Cowboys back on the map now as among the favorites after they had a dreadful week just a week ago, losing to Arizona, of all teams, a team that we thought was in the tank for the entire season. But we've been put up to the proposition of, and there's a guy down here, a local reporter, and he always asks the first question. I used to play for the Dolphins, Kim Bokamper. And it's almost like he's Helen Thomas at those presidential press conferences when she was with the Associated Press. And even though she was 100 years old and practically in a casket, it was always, Helen, what do you got for the president? And she would get up, and a very distinguished woman. I don't mean to be unflattering about her career. She was great. But, and she had the first question. So Lubie and I, we're going to shove this guy Bokamper out of the way, which is no easy accomplishment because he was a defensive end linebacker for the Dolphins with the Killer Bees for many, many years and had a great career. Not Hall of Fame, but a very good, solid career. And is a massive human being. And we're going to shove him out of the way and say, Bill, and this was popular many years ago when Chuck Noll was involved, and you had Chuck Knox, the same thing was said about him. And it even got to the point where they were referring to Don Shula, the great Don Shula, in this capacity. And that is, Bill, has the game passed you by? How quickly do we get thrown out of there if we pose that question? I mean, and it's a good thing to do in today's age of no filter, where are you better off having all the talent in the world to try and make it in this business, or just better off being a guy who will ask an asshole question like Jim Gray?
Oh, yeah, the asshole.
Right? The irritant, the guy, that should be literally taken away in handcuffs.
Yep.
Is usually the guy that makes it now in this business, is it not? So, I mean, maybe we ought to really consider doing this. Now, I've been in this situation before, Lubie, and that was many years ago. I want to say like 30 years ago. I was doing some stringing for ESPN with a friend of mine. We had a little camera crew, and obviously, somebody that was able to pass these questions off that they wanted asked for one of their football shows. And we used to get the assignments to do this with various people that they wanted from South Florida. So there was a lot of speculation. The Dolphins were in a particularly poor stretch, and there was a lot of speculation that this sentiment was going to be mounting, that Shula decides to resign and steps down because guess what, Lubie? The game has passed him by.
Honestly.
So this was a deal where I had a good relationship with Shula, and we set up a couple of chairs outside at the practice facility. It was a dump, St. Thomas University here in Miami. You couldn't even imagine that a pro team was playing there. And yet here's the great distinguished all-time wins leader, Don Shula. And this is where his team is practicing, almost like Clubber Lang, getting ready to fight Rocky Balboa in some deserted basement somewhere, pounding away on a speed bag that's all taped up. And so the first question on the list, and I'm just looking at the list of questions I'm supposed to throw at Don Shula. I'm not on camera or nothing. I'm not going to be seen in this. And the first question that the ESPN producers asked me to pose to him was, Don, in your opinion, has the game passed you by? So what do you do in that spot, Lubie? I mean, I don't want to ruin my relationship with Don Shula, and I don't want to ask him this stupid question. And yet we want to get paid by Ian. We desperately need the money. So, and we want to continue to have the job. So we want to do what it is they're asking us to do. And I'm thinking, would any of these guys from ESPN have the balls to stand in front of Don
No.
Shula and go, you know what, Don? A lot of people are talking about this, but it's a game passed you by. And I handle it by immediately establishing with Shula that these were not questions that I would ever ask you, Coach. We're on a paid assignment here. We need the money. I mean, and he actually said, you can go ahead and ask the question. And if I don't like it, I'll just pull the microphone off and, walk off. I thought, well, that won't help us. How do you sugarcoat a question like that to a coach? But we're not going to do that with Belichick. We're going to go right in there and fire away and hope he gives us one of those answers like, I mean, like just start speaking in Hebrew. It would be great. All right. There was a lot of concern about the American Ryder Cup team over the weekend. I was watching some of that action. I don't know if you caught that. I happened to wake up a few times in the middle of the night, as is my custom, getting up early all of these years to do morning drive radio. And so, it's not uncommon. You pop your eyes open at 2:30, and every now and then you go, fuck, there's live sports on the East Coast here. So I tune in this Ryder Cup. We're already buried. We're down 4-0, the United States team against the Europeans. And now that there's a lot of scrutiny about Zach Johnson, the coach. What was he inspiring enough to get this team to play? And is it a bunch of just spoiled egomaniacs that come from the United States that don't understand the concept of team spirit? Now, the crowds were tremendous there and very much, obviously, as you would think, Lubie, in Rome, huge European bias. So, while the Americans had some representation there. Any tourists out there want to go to the Ryder Cup? And I'm surprised at the level of influence that this Ryder Cup seems to have on the players. I don't think they're faking this, right? I mean, they're in tears when they win their match and in tears when they lose their match, which unfortunately was the case. I mean, we saw a lot of red, white, and blue tears being shed there at the Ryder Cup. But can you blame the coach? I saw somebody, I mean, golf is inclined and lends itself to nitpicking about minutia, does it not? And so there was actually an analysis piece that I read that questioned the pictures that the American team had up in the hotel room versus the inspirational pieces of art that were hanging in the European clubs' hotel rooms. And I thought, I don't know. When John Rahm made that putt from the Vatican, rolled over the ruins of Pompeii and through Florence and Milan, all the way down to Calabria. I mean, all of a sudden, like it was, rolling some garlic out at a meal. It rolls right into the cup. What are you going to do about that? I don't know. Can Johnson stop that? Zach Johnson? Should we be faulting the U.S. team for looking badly in the Ryder Cup action, which, was a total domination? I mean, it really did. It looked like the Canelo Alvarez Charlo fight. Just an absolute whitewashing. Pure and unadulterated ugliness taking place there. So we lose the Ryder Cup 2 years. It comes back to the United States, and hopefully these guys will be able to make amends. But I don't know that you really need to call for the head of the captain of the team. He did look, a little bit clueless, a little bit detached, as is the case with this Freeman, the coach of Notre Dame.
Oh, my God.
Does he look like he has no idea what is going to happen in the game after it's over? When he comes for the post-game interview, the person comes running out there, usually a very attractive young woman, and says, hey, coach, what about that second half? You're listening to his answers, and I want to like this guy, but it appears that he has no idea. Did he even know that he won that game? Against Duke. But pretty wild stuff. Nobody, I mean, speaking of Canelo, nobody in the heavyweights of college football yet has really taken on too much of a challenge. They literally are going to the same German graveyard as the Canelo people are, which I don't know. I mean, the question isn't, they shouldn't even ask him after the fight, who are you going to fight next? They should ask, who are you guys going to dig up next, Canelo? That would be the appropriate question. All right, baseball playoffs get underway. We'll talk some more about that tomorrow in tomorrow's edition of the morning briefing. We do want to give big cheers and thumbs up to the Miami Marlins, who came out of nowhere. Nowhere, my friends. I mean, we thought those changes before the season were purely cosmetic, And the changes at the trade deadline turned out to be just pure gold by Kim Ng, who I would think, Lubie, I mean, relatively obscure, the only woman in this position in Major League Baseball. Very impressive what she was able to do. And they juggled like 100 pitchers this year. And good job by Schumacher, the manager, first-year manager, getting the Marlins into the postseason. Even if they get clobbered by the Phillies and lose 2 straight by 10 runs in each ballgame, still, it was a good story and a continuation of the Cinderella ride of South Florida teams that we've been enjoying in what has been a great year of sports here. So many things happening. We'll get into a lot more of it tomorrow here on the morning briefing from Mike Lubie Lubitz. We thank you so much for tuning in. I'm Jeff DeForest. We'll see you on the next edition. By the way, I hit the over on Taylor Swift shots. I got 5.5 out of a Las Vegas book and went over. And it seemed like after every play, you wouldn't have known Andy Reid was at the game. It was all Taylor Swift. Too much red lipstick, Lubie. Too much red lipstick. All right, we'll see you next time on the next edition of the morning briefing.